6:52 a.m. Strait of Hormuz, Eastern Approach Corridor, 11 nautical miles from the Omani coastline. An Iranian C-14 missile boat just fired an anti-ship missile at USS Cole. Not a warning shot, not a flare, not a radio demand. AC-801 anti-ship cruise missile, fired from a range of 4,200 meters, 300 meters before the standing engagement threshold that would have authorized the destroyer to fire first. The Cole's Phalanx CIWS had 17 seconds. Welcome to Navy Powerline, where we break down the naval engagements that define American power in the world's most contested waters. What you are about to hear is a reconstruction based on documented IRGCN missile boat tactics, U.S. Navy destroyer engagement protocols, and Fifth Fleet assessments of the fast boat and light missile vessel threat in the Eastern Hormuz approach corridor. The C-14 missile boat is small, fast, and specifically designed to exploit the rules of engagement constraints and radar clutter environment of the strait. Understanding how this engagement happened requires understanding how a 23-meter boat managed to position itself for a missile shot against a 9,000-ton guided missile destroyer without being engaged first. The answer starts with a container ship. At 5:41 a.m., USS Cole, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, was transiting eastbound through the international shipping lane in the Eastern Hormuz approach, 46 nautical miles from the strait's eastern exit. The shipping lane in this section of the Hormuz approach is dense with commercial traffic at all hours. On this morning, Cole's radar was tracking 22 commercial contacts, tankers, container ships, bulk carriers, fishing craft, at varying distances between 600 meters and 18 nautical miles. One of those contacts had been present on the radar since 5:19 a.m. It was cataloged as a small fast craft, bearing 018 degrees at a range of approximately 8,400 meters, moving at 11 knots on a parallel course to the destroyer. Its radar cross-section and speed profile were consistent with dozens of small commercial craft and fishing boats that operated in the Eastern Hormuz corridor every day. The contact had been flagged for monitoring, not elevated, not prioritized, just flagged and watched. What the destroyer's radar could not resolve, because the physics of radar at that range in Sea State 2 conditions did not allow it, was that the contact was inside the radar shadow of a 180,000-ton container ship, the MV Dongling, which was running approximately 600 meters ahead and to the north of the C-14's position. The container ship's bulk was intercepting a portion of the radar energy from Cole's AN/SPY-1D array and creating a zone of reduced return behind it. The C-14 was riding in that zone. The IRGCN had identified this tactic through repeated observation of destroyer radar performance in the corridor. They had found that a small vessel maintaining a specific aspect angle relative to a large commercial ship could reduce its effective radar cross-section to a level that was difficult to distinguish from ambient clutter at ranges above 5,000 meters. They had rehearsed inserting a C-14 into a container ship's shadow in training exercises for months. On this morning, it worked exactly as designed. At 6:13 a.m., the C-14 began a slow separation from the container ship's shadow, moving approximately 100 meters per minute to the east, while maintaining its parallel course relative to Cole. Its new radar return was still within the normal clutter range for a fishing boat at this distance. Nothing in the automated track management system flagged the movement as unusual. At 6:34 a.m., the C-14 had separated enough from the container ship that its track was now an independent contact at 6,200 meters, bearing 022 degrees. The contact had been tracked independently for 21 minutes. Speed, 11 knots. Course, roughly parallel to the destroyer. Behavior, unremarkable. At 6:41 a.m., the C-14 turned. Course changed from parallel to converging, a bearing that would bring it directly toward USS Cole. The track management system flagged the course change at 6:41:48 and elevated the contact to caution status. The watch officer reviewed it at 6:42:14, 26 seconds after the flag. The contact was now at 5,800 meters converging, speed still 11 knots. The watch officer applied the same judgment that every watch officer in the Gulf applies to small converging contacts. Is it a security threat or a fishing boat that needs to give way? At 11 knots, converging from 6 kilometers, the contact was not urgent. The standard procedure was to attempt radio contact on channel 16 and monitor. The watchstander attempted radio contact at 6:42:51. No response. At 6:43:30, the contact accelerated from 11 knots to 38 knots in approximately 40 seconds. The radar track showed the speed change as a sudden shift in the track spacing. The contact was now at 5,400 meters and closing fast. General quarters was called at 6:43:44. The Combat Information Center was manned in 83 seconds. The Tactical Action Officer, Lieutenant Commander Raymond Choi, had the contact picture at 06:45:07. He classified the C-14 as a probable IRGCN missile boat based on its speed and approach profile, and requested weapons authorization from the commanding officer, Commander Sarah Okonkwo. The contact was at 4,900 meters and still closing. Under the Eastern Hormuz ROE, Commander Okonkwo could authorize warning shots when a probable military contact reached 4,500 meters on a direct intercept course. She was 9 seconds away from that threshold. She authorized warning shots early, at 4,700 meters, citing imminent threat assessment based on speed and course. At 6:45:19, the Mk-38 25mm chain gun on the port side fired a warning burst at 06:45:22. Approximately 150 rounds across the C-14's bow at a point 400 meters ahead of its current position. The C-14 did not alter course. It was at 4,400 meters, closing at 38 knots. Commander Okonkwo authorized fire to destroy at 6:45:31. The Mk-38 traversed to the C-14's hull and began tracking at 6:45:33. At 4,200 meters, a 25mm round will penetrate a wooden or aluminum boat hull, damage propulsion, and potentially detonate fuel. The C-14 fired at 6:45:37. The C-801 anti-ship cruise missile left the launch rail at 4,200 meters, 200 meters before the Mk-38 had completed its targeting solution. The missile was airborne and accelerating before the first 25mm round struck the boat. The engagement math was now brutal. The C-801 travels at approximately 250 meters per second in sea-skimming flight. At 4,200 meters range, it would cover the distance to USS Cole in approximately 17 seconds. The Phalanx CIWS acquires and engages in approximately 3 to 4 seconds from detection. Effective terminal engagement, 13 to 14 seconds of Phalanx fire at the most. The Phalanx had been in automatic mode since general quarters. The moment the C-801 appeared on its tracking radar, it fired. 6:45:40, Phalanx opened fire. Range, 3,800 meters. The 20mm cannon delivers its round stream at 4,500 rounds per minute. Against a sea-skimming missile on a direct approach in calm sea conditions, Sea State 2, the Phalanx engagement probability at 3,800 meters initial range is high, not certain, high. The round stream intersected the C-801's flight path at approximately 2,200 meters from USS Cole. The missile flew through the outer edge of the fragmentation envelope. The Phalanx tracking radar adjusted. The cannon continued firing. At 1,600 meters, a 20mm penetrator round entered the C-801's propulsion section. The engine was disrupted. The missile's flight path deviated upward, a characteristic behavior of a propulsion-killed sea skimmer, as it loses the thrust that was holding it at low altitude. The missile climbed to approximately 30 meters before its inertia ran out. It nosed over and impacted the water at approximately 800 meters off USS Cole's port bow. The warhead achieved partial detonation. The explosion sent a water column 40 feet high and scattered fragments across the surface. 3 fragment strikes hit USS Cole's hull above the waterline. All 3 were small. The largest was 11 centimeters, and none penetrated below the waterline. A fragment struck a topside antenna array and destroyed it. A second fragment impacted the bridge wing railing and deformed it. A third struck a fire extinguisher mounted on the exterior bulkhead and detonated it, causing a dry chemical discharge that briefly obscured the bridge windows. No personnel were killed. 2 sailors on the bridge wing were struck by fragment debris, one with a minor laceration to the forearm, one with a bruised shoulder from being knocked against the railing. The Phalanx had stopped the missile. It had not stopped it cleanly. Meanwhile, the Mk-38 had been firing at the C-14 throughout the engagement. The warning burst had not made contact. The first fire to destroy burst, initiated at 06:45:33, had been interrupted when the missile launched. The gun crew reacquired the C-14 at 06:45:43 and resumed firing. At 6:45:47, a burst of 25mm rounds struck the C-14 amidships. The boat's hull cracked at the engine compartment. Propulsion was lost. The boat coasted to a stop at approximately 3,600 meters bearing 022 degrees from Cole. At 6:46:03, the C-14 began sinking. The stern went under first. The bow lifted. 2 persons abandoned the vessel and entered the water. At 6:47:11, the C-14 sank. 2 Iranian personnel were in the water approximately 3,400 meters from USS Cole. Commander Okonkwo's next decision was the kind that never appears in the engagement training simulators. Her ship had been fired on. 2 of her sailors were wounded. She had damage to her hull, her antenna array, and her bridge wing. She was in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz with 21 commercial vessels in the surrounding traffic, and 2 of the crew of the boat that had just tried to kill her were in the water. International maritime law is unambiguous. Persons in distress at sea must be assisted regardless of circumstances. She ordered the rigid inflatable boat in the water at 6:48. Simultaneously, she transmitted to Fifth Fleet the engagement report and a strike request for the C-14's operating base. The RIB crew recovered both Iranian personnel from the water at 6:54:17. Both were alive. One had a broken leg, likely from impact when the boat sank. The other was uninjured. Both were brought aboard USS Cole and transferred to the medical spaces under guard. At 6:58 a.m., Fifth Fleet authorized a strike on the C-14's operating base, a small IRGCN fast boat facility on the Iranian coast near Keshem Island, assessed at approximately 28 nautical miles north of the engagement position. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets from VFA-87, the Golden Warriors, operating from USS Carl Vinson, approximately 220 nautical miles to the south, received the strike tasking at 7:02 a.m. The flight lead, call sign Warpig 1, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Reyes, was already airborne on combat air patrol with a loadout of 2 GBU-31 JDAM 2,000-pound bombs and 2 AIM-120 AMR AAMS. His wingman, Warpig 2, carried the same loadout. Transit time to the target at military power, approximately 18 minutes. At 7:11 a.m., Warpig 1 queried Fifth Fleet on a targeting issue. Recent commercial satellite imagery from a private provider showed 3 small civilian fishing craft moored at the fast boat facility as of 5:30 a.m., 95 minutes before the strike was tasked. He requested clarification of ROE regarding civilian vessel proximity. Fifth Fleet acknowledged the query. The imagery was 95 minutes old. The fishing vessels may or may not have departed the facility in the intervening period. Fifth Fleet authorized the strike with directed aim points, the concrete ramp, the boat maintenance shelter, and the fuel storage facility, and specified that if the fishing vessels were positively observed still present at the primary aim points, Warpig 1 was to abort and request updated authorization. At 7:21 a.m., Warpig 1 conducted an overpass at 10,000 feet with his targeting pod active. The imagery showed the facility clearly. The 3 fishing vessels, 1 had departed the dock. 2 remained. 1 at the dock, 1 moored alongside the ramp. The concrete ramp was occupied by one of the 2 remaining vessels. Warpig 1 adjusted his aim points in real time. The ramp was removed from the first bomb's designation. The maintenance shelter and the fuel storage facility remained. The first GBU-31 was redirected to a hardened storage building set back 40 meters from the waterline. Both bombs released at 7:22 and 8 seconds a.m. Impact at 7:22 and 41 seconds. The maintenance shelter was destroyed. The fuel storage facility detonated in a secondary explosion that was visible on the targeting pod for 11 seconds. Burning fuel, consistent with diesel storage. The hardened storage building took a direct hit and partially collapsed. The concrete ramp was undamaged. The fishing vessel on the ramp was undamaged. The second fishing vessel at the dock sustained blast damage from the fuel storage detonation. Its wheelhouse was damaged, but the boat remained afloat. The facility was assessed as significantly degraded but not fully destroyed. The ramp, the primary operational infrastructure for launching C-14 boats, was intact. At the post-strike debrief, Warpig 1 noted that the real-time aim point adjustment had taken 22 seconds. In those 22 seconds, at military power ingressing toward a target. He had been managing his weapon system, his navigation, his threat radar for surface-to-air threats from the Iranian coast, and his communication with Fifth Fleet. The decision to adjust and the execution had both happened during that window. He described it as the hardest targeting decision he had made in 11 years of flying. The two Iranian sailors recovered from the water were transferred to a Fifth Fleet support vessel at 17:40 p.m. that afternoon. They received medical treatment. The man with the broken leg was stabilized with a splint and were returned to Iranian custody through a third-party channel 8 days later. No public announcement was made by either government. The Iranian Foreign Ministry issued a statement the following morning describing the incident as an unprovoked American attack on an Iranian naval patrol conducting routine operations in the Strait of Hormuz. No mention of the C-801 missile launch. No mention of the two sailors who had been recovered from the water by the ship they had just attempted to destroy. Commander Okonkwo's battle report was filed at 14:30 p.m. on the day of the engagement. Among her formal recommendations was a request to lower the engagement authorization threshold for high-speed small craft in the eastern Hormuz corridor from 4,500 meters to 6,000 meters. She documented specifically that the C-14's missile launch at 4,200 meters, 300 meters before the fire-to-destroy threshold, had been a deliberately timed operational choice, not an accident of timing. The recommendation was reviewed. A modified threshold was implemented for probable military contacts running at above 25 knots on direct intercept courses within 60 days. The fast boat facility near Keshem retained its functional ramp. Within 72 hours of the strike, commercial satellite imagery showed two new C-14 class hulls being moved toward the facility from an inland assembly point. USS Cole completed its damage repairs in Bahrain in 4 days. The antenna array was replaced. The bridge wing railing was cut away and replaced with a temporary unit that would be properly refabricated in the next scheduled maintenance period. The fire extinguisher bracket was rewelded. The eastern approach corridor still has 20 or more commercial contacts in it at any hour. Container ships still produce radar shadows. Small fast craft still look like fishing boats until they accelerate to 38 knots. The Phalanx still has a 17-second engagement window against a missile fired from inside 4,500 meters. The C-14 that tried to use all of that against USS Cole is on the bottom of the strait at approximately 3,400 meters, bearing 022 degrees from the position where the engagement ended. The next one knows exactly what happened. There is a detail about the container ship radar shadow tactic that Fifth Fleet's after-action assessment spent considerable time on. The C-14's exploitation of the MV Dongling's radar shadow had required precise positioning, maintaining a specific lateral offset from the container ship at a specific range to maximize the radar shadow effect against USS Cole's AN/SPY-1D array. Getting that positioning wrong by a few hundred meters in the wrong direction would have exposed the C-14 to full radar visibility and likely a much earlier detection and classification. The IRGCN crew had maintained that positioning for 34 minutes while Cole approached, transited past, and began the range-closing geometry that brought the C-14 into firing position. 34 minutes of precise station keeping, inside a container ship's radar shadow, in a busy shipping lane, in sea-state two-wave conditions, while crew discipline prevented any behavioral signature that would have elevated the contact. This is not something an untrained crew does. This is a practiced skill that requires repetition and competence. The assessment concluded that the C-14 crew involved in this operation had executed a rehearsed tactic at a professional level. They had identified the opportunity, inserted correctly, maintained position, timed the acceleration and launch sequence to fire before the ROE threshold was crossed, and executed the withdrawal plan. Their plan for after the shot was to reverse course and make for Iranian territorial waters at maximum speed, before the destroyer could respond effectively. The Mk-38's fire-to-destroy authorization came before that withdrawal plan could be executed. The crew had not survived the engagement, but the tactic they had executed was documented. It was now in every Fifth Fleet surface warfare threat assessment. It was being briefed to every destroyer CO and XO in the theater, and it was being adapted because the specific parameters of the container ship shadow positioning had been validated in combat, meaning that future IRGCN C-14 operations would refine the technique rather than abandon it. The radar shadow tactic did not die with the C-14. Commander Okonkwo's recommendation for a modified engagement threshold was implemented within 60 days. Under the new guidance, a small craft assessed as a probable military vessel running above 25 knots on a direct intercept bearing could be engaged to destroy at 6,000 meters, a full 1,500 meters earlier than the previous threshold. That change added approximately 15 seconds to the engagement window for a C-14 class threat, approaching at standard attack speed. 15 seconds sounds like a small number. Against a missile that takes 17 seconds to reach the Phalanx engagement point from 4,200 meters, 15 additional seconds of Mk-38 engagement time before the launch could mean the C-14's hull is destroyed before the missile leaves its rail. Could mean, not certainly means. The next C-14 crew will know about the threshold change. They will adjust their approach speed profile to cross 6,000 meters at a lower speed, under 25 knots, and then accelerate inside that distance. The Mk-38 engagement window will be compressed again. The engagement will reset to a new geometry. This is the cycle of adaptation that runs beneath every tactical engagement in the Strait. Every protocol change creates a new gap. Every gap is mapped and exploited. Every exploitation generates a new protocol change. The Phalanx C-IWS that stopped the C-801 at 1,600 meters from USS Cole was operating within its design envelope. It performed correctly. One penetrator round disrupting the missile's propulsion at 1,600 meters is not a failure mode. It is the system working as designed. The 3 fragments that hit USS Cole's hull were the residual effect of a partial warhead detonation at 800 meters. They caused minor damage. They hurt 2 sailors. In the formal language of the engagement report, the outcome was a successful terminal defense with minor collateral damage. In the informal language of a destroyer's bridge, a missile got close enough to leave marks on the hull. The marks were cleaned up and painted over during the Bahrain repair period. They are not visible on USS Cole today, but the people who were on that bridge wing at 6:45 a.m. know exactly where they were. Stay vigilant, stay informed. See you in the next one.